Cool. I think we can probably get started. We've got a good group of people on. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm Jen Stone with the IIDA Oregon chapter. Welcome to our March Forum, Turning Passion into Climate Action. Before I introduce our guests, I just want to invite you all to throw any questions or comments that you have into the chat, and we can kind of make it interactive and, throw it in, and we'll try to monitor it and answer any questions you have along the way. And if not, we'll try to cover it at the end in a little Q&A session. So tonight we have Verda Alexander, co-founder of Studio O+A in San Francisco, and Tina Brennan, who's Vice President of Marketing and Events at Metropolis Magazine. They're going to talk to us about the Interior Design Pledge for Positive Impact. So ladies, thanks so much for taking time to speak with us. And Tina, staying up, close to your bedtime. I'll let you two go ahead and take it away.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll kick it off. And just want to say, all right, hey, give me 1 second. I think these guys, I've got some contractors that are just about to leave. All right, so it'll be a little bit noisy for a minute. Okay, bye. Thank you. Okay. Guys, I first wanted to say,
working on your own space, Verda. I love it.
Yeah, I'm trying to get some painting done. Okay, thank you. First of all, thank you guys so much for having me. I met up with these guys at the Western Regional CLC, and we just talked about our mutual passions around climate and doing the right thing and taking action. So just very excited to be here, and very excited to be here with my good friend, Tina, who I've known for a long time, and she's been with Metropolis and integral in some of these initiatives that Metropolis has done over the past few years. And so I'm really excited for her to share those with us. So go ahead, next slide. So we're gonna break this up, and sorry, my dog is clickety clacketing too. Hopefully she's about to lay down on her bed. Here. There you go. So laying down now. Okay.
So cute.
Hopefully everything will be calm from here on out. Okay, and we're going to break this into kind of 4 parts. I'm going to talk a little bit about what my passion, where I kind of woke up to climate change, and Tina's going to do the same thing. And then we're going to get into some of the actions that we did over the last couple of years. So we'll volley back and forth. And between that time, if you guys have any questions, we would love to answer them. We want this to be super informal and engaging and interactive as possible, as it can possibly be virtually. Mm-hmm. So if you don't know who I am a founder of Studio O+A. It's a workplace design firm primarily that we began in the Silicon Valley about exactly 30 years ago, now I guess 31 years ago, about to be 31 years. And we've been doing workplace design mostly. And back then I was looking at, I started really young, and I was super excited just to tear down the cubicle walls, bring light to the employees, get the CEOs off the corner office, and really shake up workplace and make it more democratic for everybody. And I was really passionate about that for a long time, until I started to see little chinks in the armor. So next slide. And started to really question, who are we designing this for? It feels like it's really just for this elite, especially in the Silicon Valley tech world. We're designing these beautiful spaces, but they're for a very small percentage of the population. We're designing these great workplaces where they can be collaborative and creative and all these things, but it's really not impacting the community and all these other things. And I had this opportunity, I believe this was 2016, a few years ago, to do a completely hypothetical project with no client at all. And so I created this narrative. It was for Salone in Milan, and we were representing the West, as there was 4 architect designers, and we were representing the West. And I was thinking, the Wild West, the frontier, Oregon too, where things are really happening. We're at the forefront of things. And so I started to think of the future of workplace. What would it be like in the future, like way out in the future, when resources were scarce? I started to get a little dystopian. I was thinking about, although not too far off, it turns out that this idea of resilience in the face of environmental collapse. And could we come together at our workplace around this idea of the scarcity of water? And I was looking at all these different ways of thinking about water and symbolism of water and all of this stuff. And so this was just something that I did and then just put on my shelf. It kind of just brewed over there. Next slide. And then a couple years later, I had a chance. I was still not getting enough out of my client work. I was still feeling like there was something missing. And I had an opportunity. Well, I guess I created the opportunity because I was lucky enough for it to be my own firm. And I was like, I want to do this project. And so it was a little crazier than I ever imagined. We went out and bought a food truck and converted it into a mobile design lab. And we went out on the road. We set up 5 stops for ourselves. We partnered with nonprofits, community groups, and we went out around California, northern and southern, and did community engagements with all kinds of people. A nonprofit in LA, a local group in Fremont, an architect and an urban planning group in Bakersfield, trying to look at how to revitalize their downtown. And I took my designers with us. It was partially this idea of getting my designers to go outside of what they're used to do, outside of their comfort zone, and try something new. And I feel like that's where you can really push your creativity. But the flip side of that was I continued on this journey of how design can be a force for good. And so I did this project. We published the book in summer of 2019. And I feel like for myself personally, I never looked back. I've been on this. I haven't worked, well, other than a few pro bono projects, I haven't worked on a client project since I've been on this track. Next slide. And so that was like I said, it was summer 2019. And then in the fall, as you all know, as I think you guys had pretty bad wildfires that year too, there was a third year of wildfires. And this cover of this New Yorker was it just was on the top, just for some reason it bubbled up to the top of this pile of magazines that I had on just that I'm wanting to read. And I'm sitting there thinking about wildfires, looking at this cover, and realized that this was this author who had written The End of Nature, this book that a book that I had borrowed from a friend, never read, always felt guilty about. And all these bells went off in my head. And I'm like, I can't turn my back on climate change any longer. I really need to figure out how to address this in what I do personally, in my practice, and in my industry. So I started to look at what that might mean. Next slide. And so a slide is missing. I just realized my designer times activist slide. Okay. Anyways, I wonder how that happened. There's a slide that I love. It's me and Tina's boss, Avi. He does these think tanks at different firms. And he asked me in November. So that was in October. In November, he calls me and says, hey, I'd like to do a think tank at your office. What would you like to talk about? I said, the only thing that I'm thinking about is climate change and how designers how can we be activists? And I thought, oh God, he's going to think I'm crazy. And he's like, no, I'm thinking right along those same lines. Let's do it. Let's explore what this might mean. So the image is us on a panel with a big banner behind us that says designer times activist. And we had a couple other activist people that were working in kind of this activist sphere talk about what that might mean, because I was just really wanting to go down that road. And then in January, I had the opportunity to write this article for Fast Company to challenge the interior design community. I was doing a lot of research and noticed that AIA had made a climate commitment. They had said right around that time had come out with this this plea that said we need to make urgent and sustained action towards climate. And I was looking at ASID, I was looking at IIDA, our association, and like, what are we doing? And I didn't see a whole lot happening. So I'm like, let me write this article. And Fast Company was gracious enough to print it for me. And let's see what we can, let's see how much we can poke the bear and if we can get that needle to move. And that was January, oh, here it is, January of 2020. So just a little bit before the pandemic. And at that same time, I decided it was going to be Action 2020 for my firm. Little did I know in March, everything would come to a screeching halt. And so I think this is where I'd like, next slide, I believe is yours, Tina. I'd like to turn it over to Tina to talk about her journey to this point. And if there's any questions, please put them in the chat.
Great. Thank you, Verda. So I myself am a marketer, and I've worked in the media world for many years. I worked at places like People Magazine. My first entree into the architecture and interior design world was when I went to Architectural Digest many years ago to be their marketing director. From there, I went and worked at interior design, and along the way, you know, like many of us, I always cared about the environment. And, you know, I was always about, you know, my first graphic up there, reduce, reuse, and recycle for a better environment. And, you know, felt like I was contributing by, you know, trying to do my best. I will say that reduce was really hard, being quite a consumer myself. But then at some point, I started thinking, like, what more can I do to make this bigger than just, you know, myself recycling my goods? And at that point, too, in my career, I had also thought that I wanted to take my marketing skills and go outside of the media world and work for a manufacturer. So I looked around, and it was really important for me to work for a manufacturer that really cared about the environment and sustainability in their processes. And part of it too was I felt like I really wanted to have a purpose, and also I really wanted to learn. And so I took a job as brand director at Human Scale. And if you're familiar with Human Scale, they produce like ergonomic products like chairs and sit-stand tables and things like that. But they had a really strong environmental message. They had a lot of net positive products. They were one of the first companies to get products living Product Challenge certified. They were really transparent in their manufacturing process. So I spent about 3.5 years there. I worked on their smart ocean chair product, which was really interesting because we partnered with a company called Borreo, who was taking they were taking fishing nets out of the ocean that were really harmful to ocean life, particularly turtles and such. And they would turn these nets into pellets that could then create things out of. And when they started, they created their own products, like they did like skateboards and sunglasses and things like that. And then they started partnering with manufacturers. So we bought these pellets from them and created the smart ocean chair out of them. And so, you know, at some point I was ready to go back and on the content side, or just make a bigger impact in the industry. And so, you know, it was really interesting. Verda was just talking about her Fast Company article. So I had actually read Verda's article right before an interview I had with Avi Rajagopal, who's the editor-in-chief. And Verda really inspired me. In my note to Metropolis and Avi, I was quoted Verda and I was saying, I don't understand why the industry, the interior design side of the industry doesn't have a pledge or some kind of commitment that we're all working towards. AIA has that, but I'm sure, we're impacting the environments and, there's probably things that we can do. And so I ended up getting the job at Metropolis, and that was actually the end of February 2020. So literally probably like a month after Verda's article came out and several weeks before the pandemic started. And if you're familiar with Metropolis, what drew me to really wanting to work there was they've been very dedicated to the issue of sustainability. They covered it in September 1996. So, I mean, in the 90s, a lot of us really weren't, as concerned about it. It's really kind of hit the pinnacle right now when we see where we're heading. But back then, Metropolis was talking about it. And then in October 2003, they actually connected the A&D community to climate change. They actually put Architects Pollute on their cover and talked about how, the carbon emissions that were created in the built environments were affecting the environment. And then recently in November 2020, Metropolis put out an article that addressed the carbon footprint of interior design. And so that was really big. It was something I think we knew as an industry, but what this article did was showed studies that had happened in the industry that showed that interior designers have a much bigger impact on climate change than we probably ever imagined. So, and
Yeah.
it really kind of speaks to, go ahead.
When this issue came out, I was so excited, and it's basically sat by my desk for like the entire year of 2021.
Yeah, it was really a call to action. Something that Verda was doing through her activism and articles and trying to get it out there that we all need to fight climate change. And these are just
sorry to interrupt. We have a question in the chat. If you want to take it right now.
Yeah.
What metrics are used to determine these impacts specifically from interior design?
Great. Yeah, I'm going to get into that in just a few minutes. There were some studies done. So I'll kind of go through that. So here just shows that how we've been increasing over the years, because it's kind of breathtaking. And here we're showing the impact when you look at the global carbon emissions by sector. Building operations are 28%, but we're estimating that building materials and construction are 11%. So to answer the question, what we found was, and what a lot of the studies showed, are life cycles, like renovations that are done over the course of the life of the space are sort of what's contributing, which was never really taken into account before. I think this is a really great timeline that speaks to that question. So there is a firm, LMN, who had actually gone back and studied the life cycle of their own space. So in 1960, it was built. And you can kind of see the structure there of the amount of embodied carbon, the structure in the envelope, and the interiors. So it was measured like, what carbon emissions happens in both the building and the interiors of the projects. But what happens is over the lifespan of a space, you renovate it several times. So there was a renovation that happened in the late 70s. Then there was another renovation, a remodeling project that happened in 1995. Then again in 2000, and again in 2010. It was a smaller project, but there was renovations made. So if you were to, add up all those renovations over time cumulatively, the interior embodied carbon is actually a lot higher. So it's really interesting, when you think about it, because it's only natural that a space gets renovated over time. So, that caused the thing, like, what can we do? Interior design is kind of a relay race. We pass the baton on to like one another as spaces get handed off to new tenants, or tenants that are in the space decide that they need like a refresh. And interior design touches lives. The question is, how do we lower carbon emissions by keeping everyone healthy and happy? And so what we did at Metropolis was we decided, how can we help people manage, create low carbon spaces. So what we did is we held what we called like a hackathon, which is really a series of like workshops where we brought a bunch of stakeholders together to kind of talk about a resource that we could create to help interior designers who are at all different stages of this journey. There's some firms and designers that are just starting out and learning about carbon and how to educate their clients on it, and also how to measure it throughout the design process and make like certain decisions. And so this is the group of people that we brought together in our hackathon. We had 58 participants from like design firms and clients and construction, and some people from associations and manufacturing side. And we held 12 workshops over the course of 4 months. And in these working groups, we looked at the business case for low carbon interiors. We looked at strategies for specification. How do we collaborate with stakeholders? The ideas around reuse, recycling, and renovation. And then we looked at certain types of workflows that could make transformation for interior design. And you can kind of see, we used like Miro boards to like capture everybody's thoughts and ideas, and then try to organize them into a resource. And a big part of the climate toolkit was to address a couple of main things. One was, how do you work with your clients to change your practice? How do you work with clients? So in working with clients, that's like one of the first maybe hurdles or challenges, is that even if you as a designer or your firm as an organization is really behind creating low carbon spaces, more sustainable environments, if your client isn't on board or doesn't see the value in it, then it's really hard to push through on these things on a project. Another thing was, how do you change your practice? Like, how do you build in certain processes and resources and education into your practice? And the third thing was tackling your next project. Like, what does that look like? How do you begin? And so this document that we created that you can find on Metropolis's website is a living resource. And meaning that what's compiled there now, we know that we have to continually like update. And we are continually out there wanting feedback, talking to designers, design firms, manufacturers to kind of keep it relevant, because we know this information changes quickly, and also new resources are added like every day. But you'll see these are just some screenshots of like what's in the toolkit. So there's lots of information, lots of links to other resources and databases and tools that we think are really helpful in the process. So, you know, it teaches you how to assess the carbon footprints of projects, how to specify and sample more sustainably. There's a section that talks about the language of carbon and, you know, all the terminology and, you know, how to understand all the documents that are available that will measure certain types of things that go into the carbon footprint of a project. And then there's a section, like I was talking about changing the mindsets, because that's really important, is also to provide information to your clients.
Okay, my turn now. So Tina and Metropolis were super busy during the pandemic. I think it was kind of a great time to look at best practices and what you're doing and take an opportunity to do something different. I did this personally, but my firm, as you'll see too, we took a deep dive into a research project as well. Sorry, go back, Tina.
Sorry.
So real quick, just plugging my podcast for a second. So summer of summer of 2020, I was just sitting on my hands where I need to do something. I want to keep going with this idea of pushing the industry. And so I started a podcast with my partner, who used to also work for Human Scale, where Tina worked before, and had a lot of material knowledge experience and knew a lot of people. His passion was plastic pollution. My passion was climate. And we decided that we were going to start by looking outside the industry, because we felt like the interior design industry is somewhat insular, and maybe we could learn more by looking outside of our industry. And actually our second guest was Dave from Bureau that Tina mentioned. He went to Costa Rica and started working with the fishermen, pulling fishing nets out of the ocean, and then trying to figure out how to reuse them and turn them into pellets that could then be turned into plastic for chairs and other products. And so that was our first season. Our second season, we started to look back at designers again. I feel very strongly that designers really are at the center of solving for a lot of these problems, or we can be, and that it's important for us to take ownership of that responsibility. All right, next. And so I was also, Avi from Metropolis had reached out to me and said, I want to do this pledge. I want to do more. This was after we had done that panel talk. And I was like, yes, I want to do a pledge too. So I think we were both kind of working in tandem, Metropolis and O+A. I came up with this. I spent 2020 with this brewing in my head, and I kept thinking, oh, I got to sit down and write this. And then it actually was the day, I don't know why, when the Capitol was, what's the word, invaded, the riots right at the Capitol. And I was watching that all unfold, and I just started writing, and I basically wrote this in a day, but it had been brewing in my head for a year. And so O+A has a pledge, and we started out with just, we don't know everything, but we need to take action immediately. That was the first pledge. And we have a couple more that aren't specific to climate necessarily, that we talk about equity and inclusion and some other things as well, but just how we want to show up as a company. I think for many firms, I'm sure all of your firms as well, it was definitely a period of introspection, and how can we show up better for the world, for our communities, and for the planet. And so this seemed like a really good time to come up with this. All right, next slide. And We also started our own toolkit. In hindsight, knowing that Tina was working on one over there, we might have maybe
You can't have enough tools.
I guess, but this one was quite the project. It was at least 5 designers for a period of about 8 months, doing a whole bunch of research. It was the perfect time during the pandemic because we didn't have a lot of work. Although as we were completing it, we were starting to get busy again. So it was a scramble for me to hang on to the staff to finish it. And we finished it last fall. But this one a little broader than just carbon and climate. We're looking at everything, how we build, how we start a project, how we go into a job site and evaluate what can be reused. How can we even look at the end of life? Because like Tina said, we do a project, then there's a new client and a new design team, and we don't have any impact or effect on what happens to our design and everything that we specify for that space once we're gone and our client's gone. And there has to be a way to have that continuity so that we can close that circular loop and recapture all of this waste. So we have a big section on waste and how to reuse, recycle, and even design with the intent of reclaiming materials. And we've got, of course, we look at materials from a toxicity, human health perspective, and environmental health perspective. And we have a small section on climate health and carbon. We felt like that was being covered, and it's also very complex. So we didn't want to take too deep of a dive in there. And we looked at social equity, how to design for equity, but also how to design for inclusion. And that includes neurodiverse people, introverts, extroverts, of course, accessibility, all those standard things. And then we felt like connecting to nature, not just biophilia and incorporating that type of stuff into our projects is important, but that this idea of just connecting to nature, understanding the importance. If you can't connect to nature, you can't understand the importance of nature and your environment. And so you can't really jump on the climate bandwagon if you don't have some connection to nature. And then, of course, we brought it all full circle with looking at our design process. And we're right now trying to roll out each of these chapters and figure out how to implement them within our practice. And for those of you that are on that journey, it is no easy task to retool and rethink how we do things, but we're doing our best. And I guess that's all we can hope for. And we're trying to do it as quickly as we can. And I would love to share resources and even just share wherever you all are on your journey. Feel free to reach out to me. I have one more slide on this eco playbook. It's just, one of the things that we've done at O+A is we've created a tool, typologies toolkit. This is well before all of this, around different types of spaces and how you need a variety of spaces in a workplace to create a workspace that actually functions and works for everybody. And so we started to build in more typologies that address some of these issues that came up in this eco playbook. And so this is what this axon is showing. And I think that's my last slide, and we're going to go to Tina's pledge. So I know that I knew that Metropolis was in tandem working on a pledge, and so she's going to
inspired by Verda.
I don't know. I think Avi and I came up with the idea maybe around the same time, but I was very happy to be part of the initial team. There was a wide swath of architects and designers that contributed initially in the planning and of this pledge. And I think this was, and I talked with the Oregon chapter at the Western Regional CLC about this. And I'm like, we need to get designers to sign on. How can we do this? And so I just was so happy that you guys reached out for us to share this pledge. And if there's a little bit of time at the end, I would love to talk about what I'm doing as IDA president in my chapter as well, in addition to this pledge. But Tina, take it away.
I will. And I want to say what's been so inspiring for me, as Verda just talked about her eco playbook, is at Metropolis, we talk with a lot of different design firms. And right now we're like in this moment where everybody wants to share. Like Verda spent all this time working on this playbook with all this knowledge and information. And, there was a time where it was a competitive advantage. I mean, it is a competitive advantage for a firm to, be able to offer this to a client, But now I think we're all understanding the urgency of the situation, and everybody wants to share their knowledge and have other designers and firms kind of adapt, whatever works for them. But we want to share tools and resources. So I think that's just really exciting, and just kind of warms my heart too. So the pledge that we put together, like Verda said, we understood we had to bring together a bunch of people to really kind of create a framework that would, be broad enough that no matter where you are on this journey, you feel like you can take this pledge and make certain commitments towards making an impact. And so we started with a group of designers from the different associations too. And then we worked it through with the major associations, IIDA, ASID, and IDC. We felt like it was important to have all the three big associations all be a part of it, be committed to it, sign off on it. And so, I feel really great that we were able to get everybody on board with it. And a big key thing was similar to Verda's eco playbook. We wanted to make sure that it touched various aspects of sustainability and wellness, that it wasn't just focused on carbon emissions, which is just one piece of the sustainability pie. That we address the fact that we have obligations to our peers, the public, and future generations to strive for a just, healthy, and sustainable society. And so the pledge really touches on three different aspects. One is design for the climate. So acknowledging that the climate crisis is the greatest single threat to health and economic prosperity on the planet, and disproportionately affects vulnerable communities. Interior design professionals reduce the negative impacts of climate change by committing to reducing emissions, optimizing design processes to reduce waste and the depletion of natural resources, design for adaptability and resilience. And we saw the importance of that the past few years, and design for responsible end of life, deconstruction, and decommissioning processes. And I think that's become more important, as Verda also talked about. It was something we hadn't really considered before, and it's probably one of the hardest things to do. But I feel like we're starting to make some real strides. Even manufacturers are really starting to look to see how they can help in that piece of it, where when their products are done being used, can they help, put them back into the system so they don't go into a landfill. The second one was designed for health. Both human and ecological health are essential components of a thriving society and essential for the future of humanity on the planet. Interior design professionals support holistic health and safety by committing to improving physical health by eliminating toxic and hazardous substances, nurture the mental wellness and well-being of people who use our space, building social health by fostering better connections between people and strengthening community, and promote ecological health by preferring processes that restore and regenerate air, water, and other natural systems.
I love how this goes beyond human health, because I've always felt like, you know, a lot of times we focus on human health, but if our environment isn't healthy, then if we're not breathing healthy air, we're not going to be healthy. So it's an ecosystem. We're part of an ecosystem. So I love how that's, focused on all the different pieces.
Yeah, and the third one is equity, which our society is now really talking a lot about, which is really good. It's something that we really hadn't, thought about as much in the process. But looking at social equity and climate justice, it's really central to cohesive, safe, and resilient communities. So as an industry, we can do that by design to benefit people with different backgrounds, include and reflect the perspectives of underrepresented communities, make design choices that directly support the health and prosperity of vulnerable communities, and prioritize access and positive experience for all people. So, and I know, Verda, your playbook also has a section on that, which is really important.
Yeah, and again, it's kind of a bigger picture importance that, if you're not treating each other like human beings, it doesn't matter what you do. Like it's like this catch-22, and a big part of why we have a climate crisis is because we have a crisis in how we treat each other and an equity issue, and they go hand in hand.
Yeah, so you can find the pledge on Metropolis's website. The link is right here.
And I think what's interesting about this pledge, and I know I've talked with you and Avi about this, is that it is an individual pledge that you would take as an individual designer, not as a company, not with your firm. And I think it's really great because I'm part of a bunch of climate groups, and one climate group that I'm part of, we are looking at how an individual can go into a firm and move a firm towards a positive direction. So I think there's a lot that we can do as individuals and as individuals within a larger organization. And there was a quote, I might have heard it at Giants, I'm not sure, but as a designer versus just as a person off the street going into a grocery store, we have 110% more weight, our buying power, our specification power, than just your average person. So, and that's not as a company, that's just you all, each as individuals. And so we can't overlook the power of the individual designer and what we can do.
Yeah, and the pledge really was created to we don't want it to feel overwhelming. So it's kind of going in and going through and maybe picking out something that you want to focus on to start with, and the idea around it too is to create a community. So, what we're going to do with the associations in Metropolis is kind of track some and tell people's stories and offer more resources and such to really create a group that kind of helps each other and inspires each other and kind of keeps this initiative moving forward. So hopefully you'll sign the pledge and you'll be hearing a lot more from us, and we'll be hearing a lot more from you on what you're doing. And you'll see, we welcome feedback too, both on the toolkit as well as the pledge. Yeah, and I think, I just want to invite everyone to check out a lot of the tools that Verda and I put forth tonight. And again, share your feedback. Because as I mentioned earlier, they're living resources. So, the idea is to keep learning from each other and keep growing with each other.
And I saw a question in the chat about contractors. You gotta love them, you gotta hate them. They're always, of course, looking for how to cut costs, how to save money, and even just recycling on a job site is a huge challenge, because a lot of contractors just want to tear up all the carpet and just throw it right into a dumpster, or not sort trash, and it's so important to do that if you really want to capture, if you want to really get the drywall from contaminating other things, and if you want to capture certain things. But VEing is a huge problem and a huge issue. I think the best advice I can give is to find a contractor that can really be your partner in this journey. And I think contractors are really starting to also get on board with what we're all doing. So it's just a matter of hopefully a very short period of time before you're going to find a lot of contractors who want to go on that same journey and want to find the best solutions, and hopefully at the best price as well.
And Verda, do you find, because I'm not on that side of the business as much, but do you find that a lot of it does come down from the client too?
Yeah.
So if you have a client that feels strongly, that their project meets certain criteria, does that often get passed down to the contractor? Or
that's a great point too, and I meant to make that, is have those meetings with all the stakeholders at the table and make sure the client expresses their direction and what they want to do to the contractor, and I'm sure they'll be a lot more apt to do the right thing. Yeah, absolutely.
It's a nice thing too that we're hearing a lot, is that sustainability and wellness is becoming a major amenity that the next generation and just employees in general really look for in a company that they're going to work for. So a lot of these companies, it's a combination of they want to do the right, and they also see the benefit of attracting good talent who, is attracted to companies that do have a strong sustainability, wellness message.
Yeah. Oh, let's see. Oh, there's a perception that sustainable design is more expensive. Do you have any strategies?
Kind of touched on that before, but yeah, if you have anything to add for
we need to get the client on board, but if it's not a priority for the client, how do we try to make it one so we can do
that's such a huge challenge, because so many real costs of damaging the environment are passed on to the consumer, and when they really should be incorporated into the cost of the product or the cost of making things. And so it is really challenging, because oftentimes sustainable design will be more expensive. I think it's becoming less expensive, so that's good. But I think clients need to look at the big picture, and there's by looking at the big picture, you can explain to a client how helping the environment ultimately will help their bottom line, because there's a lot of studies that show that companies, as climate change gets worse, everybody's going to suffer, and everybody's, the price tag of a climate catastrophe is going to be so much smaller than spending a few more dollars to do the right thing. But yeah, we're in that point in time where it's not an easy sell, unfortunately. Hopefully it'll become easier. Tina, do you have any thoughts on that? Probably not.
No, I mean, I think you kind of hit it. I do think that in general, like people are like seeing the urgency. And so everyone's sort of feeling like they need to do their part. And I think there is value in that, like I was saying, because people want to be associated with companies that are putting forth, you know, the investment in their people and their environment. So I think in that there's probably more value. It is hard because it's not necessarily tangible, but you think and you look at companies like, just say like Patagonia, where they're just like very respected. You have like consumer loyalty because it's a brand that you feel good about wearing, you feel good to be associated with. So I think, and if you've heard Avi talk before, he always says too, in like the process, it's like to go in with like a certain like amount, maybe of like, if we take like the carbon model as a thing, like you can't probably like eliminate it like everywhere across the board, but you can like find areas and stuff, to figure out like where you can, make a difference, or so I think it's kind of like working with your clients to like educate them. And you may not get them to go like 100% in, but like maybe you can get them to go 50 or 75 when they were at 0. So
and maybe also arm yourself with a few statistics. Like I just did a podcast interview with somebody who's recycling single-use plastic, turning them into outdoor furniture that's has a really long life. And yes, her product's more expensive, but it's locally sourced. She's using domestic labor, and this stuff is gonna stay out of the landfill, and it can be basically recycled in perpetuity. And so those things, just tell a client, put it out there for the client, and I guess it's up to them to decide if that extra surcharge is worth it or not. But
yeah, that's a really good point, Verda. Like the whole idea of like even longevity being a component of sustainability, and just like really doing your homework so that you can kind of present those positive aspects to the client.
I think too, we're all really busy right now, and I think it's a great opportunity for us to pick our clients as well.
That sounds awesome.
I had a quick question about sustainable materials. Are there any websites where I would be able to find sustainable materials, or like a list of resources for that?
There are. I mean, I think Mindful Materials does a really good job of that. And I think they're about to like roll out an even like greater version of their database. So I definitely would check out Mindful Materials for that.
They have a lot of information, so you have to wade through quite a bit of information, but they're definitely the most robust resource. But it's not easy. There's too many labels, too many loopholes. It can be challenging to truly specify something sustainable. But
if any of you utilize Material Bank, which I will have to disclose, they're a Sandow sister company, and Metropolis is owned by Sandow. But Material Bank, which is a sampling resource company that you're probably familiar with, particularly during the pandemic, I think they were a lifesaver to a lot of people because you could order your samples directly to your house and get it the next day. They do a lot around sustainability. I mean, one is the whole aggregation of your samples, so you're not like ordering and shipping from like all different places, which helps the environment a bit. but they also have a sustainability part of their site where you can learn about materials.
Yeah, I think they're going even deeper into sustainability. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
So I think the resources are there and they're getting better every day. And then I know we're almost out of time. I just really quickly wanted to say, kind of going back to this design activism and kind of trying to turn that snowball into an avalanche. I like I said earlier, I am IDA president of Northern California chapter. And yes, we can do a lot individually, especially as designers, specifying and moving the needle. But as an association, we can do even more because, you know, we're 1,200 people and you're a good large number of people. And we started a climate action committee. You know, this has been my tenure as president, and I'm like, I'm gonna do what I'm passionate about. And so we started a climate action committee. We backed some Senate bills around building decarbonization. We're going to do the same thing again this year. And I am just finished a draft for a position statement, similar to what AIA and ASID, they both have position. If you Google ASID's position statement on climate, you'll find something, or AIA. And so we will have that launched at the beginning of April. And I have it right here in front of me. And basically, I'm saying here, we challenge interior design professionals and industry partners to take an integral role in tackling climate change. And starting with, we recognize that climate change will severely impact ours and future generations. And so it's a short and sweet position statement, but it puts us there saying we recognize this and we want to do something about it. And I think that type of thing goes a long way. And so as an association and as designers, there is a lot that we can do. And with a great publication, we can do even more. I think Metropolis has been shouting from the rooftops for so long, and I think we're finally starting to listen.
Well, thank you. Yeah, as content creators, I think our goal at Metropolis really is, you know, to kind of help connect the community and supply them with education and tools and such. So we're happy to be up on this journey with you guys because we do know the impact that you all have. So.
And sign the joint IDA, ASID, and Metropolis pledge.
Yes, I just put the link in the chat again. So if you haven't signed the pledge and you want to, there it is. It's a great thing.
Yeah.
I think I've signed it a couple times.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and please do, you know, check out the resources. There are lots of links to, you know, really good tools that are out there to help you. And like I said earlier, please do share any feedback. I believe there is like a link to an email where you can do so, because we really are open to feedback on how to continue to make these tools and resources even better.
Yeah, and our Eco Playbook is open source, so you can download that as well. And another thing we started at IDA is climate and coffee. We're realizing that we can't, you know, these competitive silos that we're in with our firms and our different manufacturers, we don't have time to mess with that. So we're going to start sharing what we're doing in each other's firms and just going from firm to firm. So there's so much that we can do with just sharing and telling stories. And thank you, Shaina, for saying, yes, this is so important. We absolutely, Tina and I absolutely agree. So thanks for giving us the time today.
Thanks so much, ladies. So much good information. Anyone else have any last questions?
Please reach out. Yeah.
Go get a green beer in honor of climate.
Yeah.
Thanks again, you guys.
Thank you so much. This is great.
Thank you. This
Time
is
for
wonderful.
everyone to enjoy
appreciate
the
it.
rest of their St. Patrick's Day.
Tina can go to bed now and digest her St. Patrick's Day meal.
Right.
My
We can all
potatoes
have
and cabbage.
All right.
Thank you.
Guys.
Bye.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Thank
Thanks
you.
so much.
Yeah.